Greetings, class, and welcome to Community Corrections CJC 371 for the fall semester 2015. My name is Alex Holsinger, and I am your professor and instructor for this class for this semester. So welcome to a new school year, even though I realize this is towards the end of week number 2. It's my hope that the correspondence that I've sent will have sufficed as a somewhat more timely and proper welcome. This video is meant to be instructional and share with you what I think are some important points. Some of these will be redundant because they are things that I've mentioned either in an email to you individually or in an email to the class as a whole, but please take these to heart as I think abiding by these tips and this input will help you glean maximum input, maximum credit for your submissions. First of all, please, week to week, you have to make sure that you use all the material, all the reading material and or video material that has been assigned for each week. For week number 1, one of the biggest deficiencies I saw across the board was a failure to use the Harris article, for example. Most everyone watched and used the video material, but there was also an article assigned, and in future weeks there will be several articles assigned. And as such, I will look in your IRRs and your IOWs as to whether or not those materials have been used. Also, make sure that you answer the questions that have been posed. Specifically, answer all the questions that have been posed. Many, if not all, of our week's discussion questions will have multiple parts or multiple questions, so make sure that you address each one and speak to each one. Again, using the assigned material to support and inform your answers. Make sure you submit on time. The deadlines for submissions to discussion board have been stated very clearly in the syllabus and in our email correspondence: Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. Real quickly, just some real basic items. No one lost any points for this, but I wanted to point this out to you since you're all in an upper level undergraduate corrections course. There's a difference between jail and prison, and we may expound on the differences specifically between jail and prison, but those terms really can't and really shouldn't, for the student of criminal justice, they should not be used interchangeably. Jail serves many different functions. One, of course, is to incarcerate somebody for a relatively speaking, short period of time as part of a sentence, although jails serve many other functions as well in the form of pretrial detention, pre-sentence detention, probation violations, parole violations, etc. So please be certain that you're using the correct terminology, jail versus prison, and please don't use those terms interchangeably if at all possible. In addition, many of you, and again, this is okay, I'm just using this as a teaching moment as it relates to community corrections. Many of you made a point of noting that community corrections are for people who are re-entering the community after a stay in prison. And that's certainly true. However, please keep in mind, and we'll explore this more as the semester wears on, that many people, in fact most people, are sentenced directly to some community correctional option right off the bat. In other words, not everyone who is convicted of a crime and then sentenced to some form of punishment, not everyone is incarcerated. In fact, most people aren't. So many people are sentenced directly to community corrections, and a stay in a secure facility or a stay in prison is not mandatory. It's not a required part of the trajectory, as it were. While we're on the subject, community corrections could entail any number of things. Community corrections, as you hopefully saw in the introduction to our course syllabus, community corrections covers a wide array of options. Probation is an option. Parole plays a role as well. I'll get to the difference between those two in just a minute. But there are many other community correctional options. There's house arrest. There's electronic monitoring, there's GPS monitoring, there's things called day reporting centers, there's halfway houses, there's community residential treatment programs, there are what are called 24/7 drug abuse testing kiosks and things of that nature. I mean, the list could go on and on and on, and we're going to explore many of these options But keep in mind that, that when we talk about community corrections, what community corrections entails, in a nutshell, broadly speaking, is how we as a system respond to people who are in the community who are under some form of correctional control. Some form of correctional control. And that correctional control can come in a wide variety of formats and requirements and things of that nature. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, there is an important difference between probation and parole. From a distance, the two things, probation and parole, look somewhat similar. They both involve supervising offenders that have been placed in or left in the community. To be very basic about it, probation and parole supervision, and you could also refer to both simultaneously as calling them both community supervision, but parole and probation supervision typically involves an offender who is living in the community, existing in the community, but is accountable and has to report to, in some capacity, to some extent, to a community correctional officer. Now, the differences between probation and parole. Probation is somebody who's under supervision in the community who did not serve a sentence or a part of a sentence in a secure facility first. That's probation. Parole supervision, on the other hand, is somebody who is on supervision in the community who did serve at least some, of a term in prison, or in some cases jail. That's a possibility as well, but most commonly prison. Many of you in your answers, and again, no one lost points over this, but many of you used those terms interchangeably, sometimes in the same sentence. For example, you would say somebody so-and-so was under probationary supervision and then they had to report to their parole officer. Now, it may seem like I'm splitting hairs by pointing this out, but I'm really not. There's an important distinction to keep in mind in terms of fully understanding how the community correctional system works. So there is a difference between probation and parole, so please keep that in mind. More specifically, when looking at your RTO, or when writing your RTOs and your IOWs, when you're responding to others, RTOs, please avoid doing nothing but posing questions. All right, that's one thing. Some questions are fine. It's important to ask questions because by asking questions, that's one way in which you can compel a classmate to look at things in a different light, to consider things that perhaps they didn't consider with their initial submission. So questions are okay. I'm not saying that they're prohibited by any stretch of the imagination, but some of you had a tendency to do nothing but ask questions and not without adding any substantive input, so keep that in mind. Likewise, again, going forward, I'm going to look at this a little bit more critically, but please keep in mind that the purpose of your responses, your RTOs, is not simply to say, hey, nice job, I liked your post, I totally agreed, I see what you mean, etc. The RTOs are meant to give your classmates substantive critical analysis. Your RTOs are designed to help compel your classmates to, again, think of things that they might not have thought of originally, to look at things a little bit differently, to consider something that they might have omitted in their initial response. Now, again, along with that, per the syllabus, be polite, be constructive, be professional, etc. But don't just approve of and cheer people on. And believe me, I'm a big fan of positive reinforcement. There's nothing wrong with being complimentary. There's nothing wrong with adding questions, as I stated before. But do make sure that in your RTOs you add something substantive in the form of critical analysis. Likewise, your IOWs, you're incorporating other people's work. Your IOWs are meant to be essentially a reposting of what you shared in your IRR, but you need to improve it. You need to incorporate what other classmates gave you in the form of RTOs, provided you did get some substantive feedback, and to add to it. So your IOWs should be a refined and improved and more comprehensive version of your IRR. Some of you, for your IOWs, you simply responded to what other people had said. And that's not going to cut the mustard going forward. So I will cut this off now in an effort to try to keep these video segments short. This probably won't be the last one. I will use this as a medium to communicate to you periodically. So again, welcome to the semester. Please write me email or feel free to call at any time if you have any questions, and be mindful of those deadlines. All right, good luck going forward. I look forward to reading your work. Take care.